Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. Some background: I've been married to my wife for almost 5 years now. She's amazing, but her parents, well, they're a different story. They've always been the type to overstep boundaries, but usually it was manageable stuff like showing up unannounced or giving unsolicited advice about our lives. My wife grew up with their behavior, so she had a harder time seeing how inappropriate it was sometimes, but we were working through it. About 6 months ago, I bought myself a car that I'd been saving up for, a 2018 Mustang GT. Nothing super fancy, but it was my dream car and I'd worked hard to be able to afford it. I'm not really a car guy in general, but there was just something about this car that I loved. It was metallic blue with the premium package, and it was in pristine condition with only 30,000 miles on it when I bought it. I paid $28,000 for it, which was actually a pretty good deal. My in-laws had made some comments when I bought it, things like, "That's a lot of money to spend on something so impractical, and you should have bought something more family-oriented since you and my daughter will be having kids soon." We weren't even planning on kids in the near future, but that's a whole other issue. I mostly ignored them because I was just happy to finally have my dream car. Fast forward to last month. My wife and I had to fly across the country for my cousin's wedding. We were going to be gone for a week, and I decided to leave the Mustang in our garage rather than paying for long-term parking at the airport. My wife suggested letting her parents' house sit since they live about an hour away and could water our plants and take care of our cat. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We left them a set of keys to the house, but I specifically told them not to use my car. I even put a cover on it in the garage to make it clear it wasn't to be touched. My father-in-law looked a bit annoyed when I mentioned this, but nodded and said, "Don't worry about your precious car. We won't touch it." The wedding was great. We had a fun time, and we flew back home a week later. My in-laws picked us up from the airport, and everything seemed normal. They said the cat was fine, the plants were watered, and all was well at our house. My father-in-law even joked, "And yes, we didn't touch your car." I thanked them for looking after things, and we went home. When we pulled up to our house, I noticed the garage door was partially open, which was weird because I remembered closing it properly before we left. As my wife was dealing with the luggage, I went to check the garage. The car cover was off, and not just off, it was crumpled in the corner of the garage. But what really made my stomach drop was that the car was parked at a slightly different angle than how I'd left it. I immediately popped the hood and checked the mileage. It showed 150 miles more than when I'd left. Someone had driven my car. I was furious, but tried to stay calm as I went back inside. I asked my wife if she thought her parents might have used my car while we were gone. She looked surprised and said she didn't think they would do that, especially after I explicitly asked them not to. I decided to check our home security camera footage. We have cameras outside our house, including one that shows the driveway and garage. As I scrolled through the footage from the past week, what I saw made my jaw drop. The day after we left, my in-laws showed up with another couple I didn't recognize. They opened the garage, took the cover off my car, and the four of them spent time looking at it. Opening doors, sitting inside. Then my father-in-law actually took them for a ride in my car. They were gone for over an hour before returning, but it gets worse. The next day, different people showed up with my in-laws, and then more people the day after that. It was clear what was happening. My father-in-law was showing my car to potential buyers. I showed my wife the footage, and she was shocked and embarrassed. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying. "I have no idea what they were thinking." I decided to call my father-in-law directly. When he answered, I tried to stay calm. "Hey, I noticed my car's been driven about 150 miles since we left, and the security cameras show you've been bringing people over to look at it. What's going on?" There was a pause, and then he laughed awkwardly. "Oh, that. Well, I was just showing it to a few friends who were interested in that model. No big deal." "And you drove it 150 miles in a week?" I asked. Another pause. "Well, had to make sure it was running well to show them." I was getting angrier by the second. "Be straight with me. Were you trying to sell my car?" Finally, he sighed. "Look, I know a guy who's been looking for exactly that model and was willing to pay good money for it. I thought I'd help you out. That car is impractical for you anyway, and you could use the cash for something more suitable." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You were going to sell my car without my permission?" "Well, we were going to surprise you with the cash when you got back," he said, as if that made it better. "We found a buyer willing to pay $32,000 for it. That's a $4,000 profit. I thought you'd be happy." I was speechless. My wife, who was listening on speakerphone, jumped in. "Dad, that's not okay. You can't sell someone else's property without asking them." "Oh, come on," he replied. "We're family. I was doing him a favor. Besides, he doesn't need a sports car. You two should be thinking about a family vehicle. I had to end the call before I said something I'd regret. After hanging up, my wife and I had a long talk. She was mortified by her parents' behavior and completely on my side, which was a relief. We decided to go over to their house the next day to talk about this face to face and make it clear that what they did was completely unacceptable. That night, I kept thinking about what had happened, getting angrier and angrier. I checked my keyring and realized that I had left both sets of car keys at home when we went on our trip. The main key I used daily and the spare. I had assumed they were safely in our house, but now I wasn't so sure. I went to check my desk drawer where I keep the spare key, and sure enough, it was gone. Early the next morning, before we were set to go to my in-laws, I decided to check the security cameras one more time, and that's when I saw it. Footage from just a few hours ago, around 5:30 a.m. My father-in-law had come to our house, used his key to get in, and driven away in my Mustang. I immediately woke up my wife and showed her the footage. She was horrified and tried calling her dad, but he didn't answer. She then called her mom, who claimed not to know where he was. My wife didn't believe her and told her we knew he had taken my car and demanded to know where he was. Finally, her mom admitted that he was meeting with a buyer to finalize the deal. That was it. I'd had enough. I called the police and reported my car as stolen, explaining the situation. I told them I had video evidence of my father-in-law taking the car without permission and that he was currently trying to sell it to someone else. I gave them a description of the car and my father-in-law, along with the license plate number. My wife was upset, but understood why I did it. "I'm sorry it came to this," she said, "but they've gone too far." About 2 hours later, I got a call from the police saying they had found my car at a diner parking lot on the other side of town. They had detained my father-in-law and another man, who turned out to be the potential buyer. When my father-in-law tried to explain that it was all a misunderstanding and that he was just helping his son-in-law sell his car, the buyer quickly realized something was off and confirmed to the police that he'd been told the car belonged to my father-in-law. I went to the police station, provided proof of ownership, and gave a statement. They allowed me to take my car home, but told me that my father-in-law was being charged with auto theft and would have to appear in court. As I was leaving, my father-in-law was being processed for release on bail. He saw me and his face turned red with anger. "You called the cops on me? Your own family? After everything we've done for you?" he yelled across the station. I just shook my head. "You stole my car and tried to sell it without my permission. What did you expect?" "We were just trying to help," he shouted. "That car is a waste of money. You should be grateful." One of the officers intervened before things escalated further. As I walked out, I heard my father-in-law still ranting about ungrateful children and how he was just trying to help. When I got home, my wife was waiting anxiously. She hugged me and apologized again for her parents' actions. "I never thought they'd go this far," she said. "I support you completely in pressing charges." That meant a lot to me, because I know how hard it is to stand up to your own parents. But I was still fuming about the whole situation and undecided about whether to actually go through with the charges. That decision was made for me when my mother-in-law showed up at our door a few hours later, hysterical and blaming me for everything. "How could you do this to us?" she screeched as soon as I opened the door. "Your father-in-law was just trying to help you make a smart financial decision. Now he has a criminal record because of your stupid car." My wife stepped in front of me. "Mom, Dad stole the car. He tried to sell someone else's property without permission. That's not helping. That's criminal." "Oh, so you're taking his side now?" her mother spat. "After everything we've done for you two? We raised you better than this." My wife didn't back down. "You raised me to respect other people's property and to not take things that don't belong to me. Dad was wrong, and you know it." Her mother turned to me. "You've poisoned my daughter against us. We're her family, not you." That's when I'd had enough. "With all due respect, you both crossed a line. You violated our trust, broke into our home, took my property without permission, and tried to sell it. And instead of apologizing, you're here yelling at us like we did something wrong. I think it's best if you leave now." She stormed off, but not before threatening that we'd regret this, and that they were just trying to help. We closed the door and both sat down, emotionally exhausted. Over the next few days, both my in-laws tried different tactics. My father-in-law called and apologized, but it was clearly not sincere as he kept adding, "But we were just trying to help after every sorry." My mother-in-law tried to guilt my wife by saying she couldn't sleep and was having anxiety attacks because of the family rift. They even enlisted other family members to call us and tell us we were overreacting and should drop the charges because family is more important than a car. My wife and I stood firm. We made it clear that what they did was a serious violation of our boundaries and trust, and there needed to be consequences. The fact that they still couldn't seem to understand what they did wrong only reinforced our decision. The court date arrived, and my father-in-law ended up pleading guilty to a reduced charge of unauthorized use of a vehicle. He got 100 hours of community service, 12 months of probation, and had to pay a fine. The judge also ordered him to write a formal letter of apology to me, acknowledging what he did wrong and why it was inappropriate. My mother-in-law refused to attend the court hearing, saying she wouldn't participate in this farce. My wife was hurt by this, but remained supportive of my decision to press charges. After the court case, we didn't hear from my in-laws for nearly a month. My wife tried calling a few times, but only got short, cold responses. It was hard on her, and I felt guilty about being the cause of the family rift, even though I knew I was justified in my actions. Then, unexpectedly, my father-in-law's written apology arrived in the mail. It was clearly written with gritted teeth, but he did acknowledge that taking my car without permission was wrong, and that he should have respected my property. He also admitted that trying to sell it was an error in judgment. It wasn't the most heartfelt apology, but it was something. A week later, my mother-in-law called my wife and suggested we all meet for dinner to clear the air. We agreed, though I was skeptical about their motives. The dinner was tense at first. My mother-in-law could barely look at me, and my father-in-law seemed embarrassed. Eventually, though, he cleared his throat and said, "I want to apologize again for taking your car. It was wrong, and I shouldn't have done it, regardless of my intentions." My mother-in-law nodded stiffly. "We both got caught up in thinking we knew what was best for you two, but we should have respected your choices." My wife squeezed my hand under the table as I replied, "I appreciate that, and I'm sorry it came to involving the police, but I felt like I had no other option when I saw the car was gone." My father-in-law nodded. "I understand. I put you in that position." He paused. "And the car is actually pretty nice. I can see why you like it." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was a start. We set some clear boundaries about respecting our property and choices, and they seemed to be listening, even if reluctantly. Over the next few months, things slowly improved. My in-laws were more careful about respecting our boundaries. They called before coming over and didn't make comments about my car or our lifestyle choices. They were trying, which was all we could ask for. As for my Mustang, I installed a tracking device and an extra security system just in case. But honestly, I don't think my father-in-law will be borrowing it again anytime soon. Looking back, I'm glad I stood my ground. It wasn't easy, especially for my wife who was caught in the middle, but it was necessary. Sometimes you have to take drastic action to make people understand that they can't walk all over you, even if they're family. Especially if they're family. My wife and I are stronger for having gone through this together. We've learned how to present a united front against boundary violations regardless of where they come from. And my in-laws, well, they've learned a valuable lesson about respecting other people's property and choices. So, yeah, I reported my own car stolen when my in-laws tried to sell it without my permission. And even though it created some family drama, I don't regret it one bit. Sometimes you have to teach people a lesson they won't forget. The next one is a Malicious Compliances story. I work at a big retail chain where the stock room is the Wild West and chaos is the norm. We recently got a new supervisor, Sarah, who seems to think she's running the Navy SEALs or something. She's obsessed with speed, constantly on us about how we need to get things done faster. Doesn't matter if it's done right, as long as it's done fast. So one day, during peak restock time when we're drowning in boxes, Sarah storms in with her clipboard and her best I'm in charge face. She corners me while I'm halfway through a massive inventory check and says, "You're taking way too long with these, just get through them quickly. We don't have time to check every single item." I try to explain that rushing inventory checks is a bad idea, but she cuts me off with a condescending smile. "If you can't speed this up, maybe this job isn't the right fit for you," she says, all smug like she just dropped a bombshell. "All right, Sarah, you want speed? Let's see how fast things can spiral out of control." So, I take her words to heart and decide to follow her instructions exactly. The next day, I'm scheduled for another inventory check. Instead of my usual process where I count everything carefully, I decide to play Sarah's game. I glance at the shelves and make up numbers that seem about right. I don't even bother opening boxes to check if what's inside matches the labels. I fly through the whole process, marking items off like I'm speedrunning a video game. What usually takes me 2 hours, I finish in just 20 minutes. Sarah sees me finish up and I can see her eyes light up. She walks over, grinning ear to ear. "See, that wasn't so hard, was it? If you keep this up, you might even get a little bonus this month," she says, patting herself on the back for her brilliant leadership skills. Fast forward a week, and the store manager, Mike, calls an emergency meeting. The inventory reports have come back, and they're a total disaster. According to the report, we're missing thousands of dollars worth of products. It looks like we either lost half the stock or we're running some underground black market. Mike's pissed. Customers are complaining about out-of-stock items, and the regional manager is breathing down his neck. Mike turns to Sarah and asks her to explain how this could have happened. Sarah, trying to save face, immediately points at the team and says, "They must have messed up the counts. They weren't thorough enough." She's throwing us under the bus without a second thought. This is where I decide to strike. I raise my hand and say, "Actually, I did exactly what Sarah told us to do. She said to skip checking the items and just get it done as quickly as possible. I was just following orders." You could hear a pin drop. Mike slowly turns to Sarah, his expression going from confused to furious. "Is this true?" he asks, narrowing his eyes at her. Sarah's stammering now, trying to backtrack. "Well, I didn't mean to skip it entirely, I just meant to speed it up." But it's too late. The damage is done. Mike's already fuming. "So you decided to cut corners on the one thing that affects our bottom line? You do realize we have to do a full recount now because of this mess, right?" And that's exactly what happens. The next day, Sarah and a few unlucky team members spend 12 hours redoing the entire inventory check from scratch. The rest of us get to enjoy watching them sweat it out while we handle our regular duties. It's glorious. As they're counting, I make sure to walk by every so often and ask, "Need any help speeding things up? I could skip a few checks for you if that helps." The look on Sarah's face every time is pure rage mixed with embarrassment. She can't say anything because she knows I'm just doing what she asked for. By the end of it, we've found thousands of dollars in discrepancies. Turns out, rushing through inventory checks leaves a lot of room for errors. Who knew? The regional manager isn't happy, and Sarah ends up getting a formal warning. She stops harping on us about speed after that, and even tries to be extra nice whenever I'm around. Guess she realized that maybe, just maybe, some tasks shouldn't be rushed. The best part? A couple of weeks later, I get a small bonus for outstanding attention to detail and helping fix the inventory mess. Oh, the irony. Sarah couldn't even look me in the eye when I got the bonus slip. And every time she walks by me now, I just give her a friendly smile and say, "Don't worry, boss, I'm working as fast as you want." The next one is an entitled parent's story. My 25F parents, 50F, 52M, should not have had kids. I'm an accident that never should have been given a chance, and I say that despite how hard I'm clinging to life now. They were unfit then, and they're 1,000 times worse now. But my mother takes the cake. Before I could barely form memories, she cheated on my dad and then spent the following 24 years genuinely believing he was in the wrong. We talked about it around a year ago, and the reason she believes he was at fault is because he begged her to have a three-way with a friend of his. She could have said no. She was practically the boss in their marriage. She did not find it difficult to put him down for everything else, so by no means was she forced into accepting his desire. She did it, fell in love with the other guy, then started seeing him, but she thinks she was allowed because he wanted the three-way. No matter how much I tell her that's wrong, she works it out in her mind that she's the victim. When she remarried, she did so to beat my father to remarry, now out of love. She'll admit as much. According to my stepdad, who has no reason to lie 20 years later, claims she was on heavy drugs during their marriage. He was in a car accident at one point, and she stole his painkillers to get high, leaving him to suffer. At one point while she was high, they got into an argument that led to her pushing him down a flight of stairs. So he left her. And she spent my whole life telling me he abandoned us. She went insane after that. She was either drinking or doing drugs when she got into a major car accident, which somehow made her worse. And for years she wasted away, living in filth, not paying electric bills, never keeping any food around, not getting up to take me to school. We ended up homeless quite a few times as well. So I stopped living with her, and she started guilt-tripping me. But the worst part about this time period is she started acting very groomy towards me. I didn't pick up on it at the time, but I've had years to process it by now. She would make me shower with her when the power was out, which did absolutely nothing for warmth. She constantly walked around the house naked around me. She complimented my business. She expressed excitement at certain puberty developments. She left nudes on the computer that everyone used. And at one point, she flat out told me I was sexually attracted to her. It wasn't a suggestion, not like, oh, maybe this is something you're feeling. She said it as if it were fact. And I feel this goes without saying, but there was absolutely no basis for that claim. I was, and still am, very uncomfortable around her, and I make that pretty obvious. Fast forward to 2023, I'd been radio silent for years at this point. I was homeless and in a very bad way health-wise, and yet I refused to contact her to beg for help. I was going to die alone in a parking lot, and I had made peace with that. My ex is the one who contacted her for me. I don't hold ill will against her for doing that. She saved my life. But my life trapped with my mother again has not been good for me at all. For the first 6 months, I felt like I needed to hold my tongue because she was the one more or less taking care of me while my body tried to heal. So I played the grateful daughter and kept my mouth shut when she inevitably broke my boundaries. One such boundary being, do not touch me, given previous issues mentioned. After about 6 months, she started talking to a guy who lived overseas, claiming he was going to come into our lives and give us everything we needed. He was going to pay to get her issues fixed up and get us a nice house, etc. A scam. Obviously. I said as much, but did she listen? No. She sent him enough money to start a building project of some kind. A house, maybe. IDK, she didn't specify. Lied about that too, even when she lost her apartment due to too much missed rent. This part isn't as worse as everything else she's done or continues to do, it just makes me really angry for some reason. She got me pizza for my birthday while we were out living in our cars, which I didn't pass up because we were otherwise frequently starving. She said she also bought one of those brownie trays and asked if I remembered her making me brownies for my birthday when I was a kid. I told her no, and she asked if I remembered anything good from my childhood. I told her no, and she started crying. Then she just took the brownies with her and ate them alone all to herself. Like, okay, I didn't want anything for my birthday, I didn't even want to acknowledge it that year, but why even mention that as if it were a birthday thing just to eat them all yourself, while we were otherwise starving? I'll say again. She did things like that a lot. Doing favors for people like driving them around and asking for candy or sweets or soda in return, rarely food. And she'd eat it all herself. I swear, in the entire 9.5 months we were out there, she gained weight. I lost a significant amount of weight. Now that we're housed, she's no better. We have cats again, despite her history of getting them killed. She vapes in the house around them all the time, and I've urged her to stop. She won't. Gets in the way of her comfort. She was sleeping with her boyfriend upstairs, but his snoring kept her awake, so now she sleeps right outside my room with her TV on at all hours of the night, keeping me awake, and when I ask her to stop sleeping with the TV on, she says I'm not respecting her PTSD coping methods or whatever, even though she's slept without a TV plenty while we've been here with no issues. She's loud as crap. She's never below an outside volume, waking me up all the time. She quit her job recently because she didn't like that her boss had to train her because she's so full of herself she thinks she's the best and hardest worker at any job she works. She's constantly moaning because she's in pain and it keeps her from complaining about it, even though she does that plenty. She does all of these things that, while for a while I can bite my tongue, but eventually it gets to be too much and she'll do or say something to set me off and I tell her how she's making me feel. But she uses that against me. Takes my anger as an aggression to make me out to be the bad guy. Tells me I'm selfish, spoiled, ungrateful, says I'm always negative, that I'm never happy. But that's just the thing. I was depressed for 15 years, and despite all odds, I somehow managed to pull myself most of the way out of it. Religion helped a lot, and for a while I could smile at the rising sun. I felt like I could breathe. I was proud of myself. I was excited about life and my future. For the first time in around 15 years, I did not want to die, but she's becoming too much. Every time we get into a yelling match, every time she throws insults at me, every time she projects all of the things she does onto me, every time she makes me out to be the crappy person that she is. I felt no joy to be alive today. I felt no passion. I felt no interest in anything. I didn't take care of myself. I hardly ate. I stayed in bed to rot. I was supposed to be here until at least August 2026, but I don't think I can make it. She's driving me insane. I haven't been manipulated the way she's manipulating me since I lived with my father and his girlfriend in 2020-2021. I thought I escaped it before, but I'm trapped again, and it feels like a cruel joke. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.